Alrighty, you are so damn close to starting your podcast and hitting that record button. But I want to take a little deviation before we do so for those of you that might not have got in front of a microphone, so that way you have the confidence to talk on your podcast for those listening. That's what this episode is going to be about. So let's roll the titles. Brand My Podcast. This is a show for podcasters to start your podcast with confidence and elevate your voice to give your listeners a brand they can connect with. Brand My Podcast. G'day and welcome back to Brand My Podcast. I'm your host Frank, as always. And I want to say that if you've got to episode 6 now, you've listened to all of them, or you're just tuning in for the first time, thanks for being here. I really want to thank you for the support of listening to this podcast, and I hope in turn it is inspiring you, giving you some tips along the way, and giving you the confidence to start your podcast so that hitting record when you do is as easy as doing just that. Now, today's topic of conversation is for those of you that haven't got in front of a microphone before to do something like this. You might not have been a guest on a podcast before. You might not have had any kind of speaking gigs. Podcast might be that little bit imposing for you to share your voice. You might not like the sound of your voice. So the topic today is going to be how to talk with confidence on your podcast. Now, there's a few different things we can do, but I want to just take a little quick step back here to say that if you have these doubts about things like how you sound, how people will think you sound, or what you have to say, is wrong or, isn't, good or whatever it might be, they're all, your inner critic thoughts going on in your mind there. People aren't thinking about that stuff. They've all got their own problems to not want to have to worry about your own, It's one of those things that, we all get caught up in about what other people think of us. And a podcast is one of those things because it is so personal that can be the hurdle of even just starting. So I appreciate you if that's where you're at now, because I know that's how I felt when I started. I was so confident about wanting to start it, but when I pressed record, I re-recorded and re-recorded. And look, to be honest, I still do that. That's a fact of podcasting, especially if you do it just yourself. It can be hard work of getting that energy and getting your words right, not falling over things so it sounds like you're a bit stupid. I don't know. These are the things that we all consider and think about and mull over, which are things that we shouldn't do. The other point is that the more you do of this, the better you will get over time. The more eloquent you will be, and the more confidence you'll have of stepping up to the mic and just talking. It really does take time, but just know that in time, each episode that you record, you will get better and better. All right. I've got 5 tips for you to give you the confidence to talk on microphone or in front of a camera if you're watching this on YouTube. And the first one is to smile. Smiling, I've heard this from so many different people over the years. Smiling gives you that energy, that perk, and gives someone else that feeling that you are there with that energy. That you're inspired and you're interested in what it is you're talking about. If you're talking really flat and you don't have, a smile, it sounds like this, and you're really serious and there's no real emotion. It might even sound a bit sad. But if you're smiling, it changes the dynamic of how you express yourself. You can't help but have that energy there while you smile. It's a really weird thing, but try it out. I really encourage it. That's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is please don't read off a script. It takes out all the authenticity. Even if you stumble over your words sometimes, that's okay. That brings some realness to your podcast. But reading off a script makes it much more mundane, and it takes a lot of practice to be able to talk. Reading off something like an auto cue, your notes verbatim with your personality. Things like people like newsreaders. It takes them years of experience to get, professional at doing that. And even still, they fumble over their words, and you see those mishaps and in YouTube memes and all those kind of things. But I'm here to tell you that I've tried it. I've tried having an auto cue in front of me. I have one here, the glass panel, and I can reflect up an iPad and do all the rest of it. But it comes off it feels like dogmatic in what you're talking about. It's like you're listening to a sermon or someone, telling you rhetorically what it is you need to do. What you want a podcast to be is more conversational, especially if it's just yourself. This is where that comes into play of reading off a script. What I would suggest you do instead, if you need to have points in front of you, is to have, a piece of paper with, your notes written down, but just do simple bullet points. This is what I have to the side of me here. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to share a screenshot of my notes just for this episode here right now. It's simple as, so what you can do in a podcast, and even if you record video as well, is pause what you're saying at each dot point to then look at your notes, come back, start again, and then edit it later in post. That's how I typically do it. That takes the pressure of having to record one long episode in one take, because that's going to be even harder. So that's tip number 2. There's kind of like a few tips in there though, but that's tip number 2. The third is, and I touched on this last episode, is sharing what you know. Because what that does is sharing what you know is you're confident then about giving that and sharing that with your listeners. If you don't have any idea about what you're talking about, you're going to fumble over what you're going to say. It's going to seem inauthentic, and you're just going to come across as someone that might not be as knowledgeable as they're positioning themselves to be. We sniff it out as an audience. If you're not up to snuff with what it is you're talking about, we can tell. It's like having to play poker. Like, you may as well have, your sunglasses on and playing a poker face if you're not too sure about what it is you're talking about. So read up, get knowledgeable, learn more about what it is you're talking about. Also adding things like context and stories behind what it is that you know, so that it shows your understanding about what it is you're talking about. I mean, I'm forever going on Instagram and seeing other people's content that I'm learning from how to be a better communicator. I follow a few people that talk about how to communicate better on camera, and I implement those little tactics into the way that I deliver my content. So that's tip 3. The fourth tip here is an interesting one, and it might not be possible for all of you, but it's standing up. Now, you might not think there's anything in standing up, but what standing up does, and I'm going to kind of do it just kind of here quickly. Like, if you're watching this, you can see it, and all you can see is my torso. But if you're listening to this, you can't see anything. But I'm standing a little further away from the microphone. But what it allows me to do is I'm moving my body around, my arms around, and it gets that added bit of energy. I'm going to come back down to the mic now. But it gives that added bit of energy for you to express yourself and what you're talking about. It lifts your energy, that like extra 10%. And that's what I'm always looking for in my own content, to give that extra 10% of myself so that it does sound interesting, so that it does sound way more engaging for our listeners to sit up and listen and pay attention. So that's tip number 4. And then tip 5, which is pretty much the same as tip 4, is move around if you're sitting down. Just the same as standing up. Make a point of moving your arms around, making sure you don't hit the mic, obviously. And it might be a little bit harder if you want to move your head around and your body around, depending on your microphone, because you might need to be quite close. But if you can express yourself in that same manner while sitting, it does allow that energy to exude in the way that you communicate as well. So that's 5 tips to help you gain the confidence to step up to the mic or in front of the camera and deliver your podcast with that energy, with that confidence, that happiness, that joy, that excitement that we all want to hear from you when you're talking about what it is you're talking about. I mean, unless it's the topic of conversation doesn't really fit with that level of energy, that's okay. But I'm sure you will work that out as well. But there are 5 tips, though, that I hope will give you that confidence to step up to the mic. With that, if you want to follow on with some more tips about this kind of stuff to get the confidence to create a podcast, make it easy for you, follow me on @G'dayFrank, or if you need someone in your corner to help you start your podcast, to get it all set up, to plan it out, to strategize it, to make it look the goods, hit me up at brandmypodcast.com. Other than that, please leave a review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. If not, that's okay. You can send me some questions, or you can give me some feedback on Instagram or on LinkedIn or via my website. There's a contact form there if you really want to let loose and suggest some things that maybe we could cover in this podcast. But until next time, see you soon. Bye.